Josh posted. Oh, thanks, Josh. Josh posted the meeting. Basically, one subject, just discuss. What is it exactly? Rat something or other. Rodent control initiative. So, I thought it would be useful. I know we haven't met in quite a long time. I think that's going to change, which is going to be exciting, I think. Um, but I thought I would just sort of start with sort of an overview of open meeting and protocols, committee protocols, just so everybody's on the same page. Obviously, everybody knows that we have to post the actual meeting. Josh, for your purposes, is sort of the expert on that. We have to post the meeting, inform the public that we are going to have a meeting at least 48 hours in advance of the actual meeting. So 2 days, it does not include weekends, so that if we have a meeting on Monday, we have to post that on no later than a Thursday. So one of the open meeting rules is that, especially with us, and this is particularly true with small groups of people, small committees, small boards, is that you have to be very careful about communications. If your communication could be construed as working towards a vote or working towards a position on a particular subject that you're talking about, that all that communication has to be in an open posted meeting. So sending emails, and everybody gets into this trap, sending an email amongst the members saying, hey, it wouldn't be a good idea if we did X. Well, that technically is a violation of open meeting. So as I say, it's very difficult with such a small committee, but I do recommend, if you're going to email, most of the emails probably should go through Eric, and Eric should make sure and will make sure that when he sends out any information to you, that you're blind copied, and you're blind copied not so that you don't know each is getting it. You're blind copy so you don't inadvertently hit reply all and then inadvertently violate the open meeting laws. So that's very basically it. Maybe I'll give you a little background on how this meeting came about, and then later on we can talk a little bit about stepping forward, moving forward, and how I know we need to find a new member, which we will, but I fully expect that the Board of Health will be more engaged, as we seem to have a council that wants to engage the Board of Health a little bit more on a number of different items, which is great. That's how it should work. So I'm excited about that part. We've had a number of either complaints or sightings of rodents, specifically rats, in Bridgewater. We're not quite sure. I think Eric's got some ideas of what's causing sort of either a resurgence or a presence of rats. Sometimes it is something as easily explained as construction, disruption of rats from one place, and they will migrate to another place. I think, Eric, you had an interesting notion that the pandemic actually closed down BSU, which may have been sort of a feeding ground for them, and pushed colonies further up into town where they could find food. We had a neighbor complaint filed probably a couple of months ago now, complaining that a neighbor's keeping of chickens was that they weren't keeping their chickens, or at least the chicken feed in proper containers, and that was causing rats to enter into the neighborhood. So that is sort of what this most recent proposed ordinance came from, and I think Eric circulated the proposed ordinance to you guys. That so why so I've had discussions with several counselors on the wisdom of making it an ordinance. I think, based on probably our discussion several years ago, that the Board of Health actually has significant powers under Mass General Law under Chapter 111 to promulgate regulations that everybody in town has to live by, specifically obviously health related regulations. So you have that ability. So you're the only board in town, in municipal government, other than the town council, that can actually establish rules and regulations on health issues. So the council can pass an ordinance for the purpose of regulating health issues, but really it should be the Board of Health that's promulgating regulations to that end. So prior to both of your tenures on the Board of Health, I think the last set of regulations that were at least attempted were related to the keeping of domesticated fowl, chickens, turkeys, ducks, and so forth. That met with huge. I think there was a lot of miscommunication. Well, I know there was a lot of miscommunication around that particular set of regulations, and that met with a lot of public resistance, which I completely understand. And that essentially went nowhere. The board backed off on that, and so that nothing happened with that. So so now we're in a period where we arguably have a few health issues percolating. The regulations involving rodents is a tricky one, because we don't, as a town, necessarily have the power to come onto property. The police, and a lot of people don't realize this, police don't have an automatic right of entry onto a property unless they get a warrant, and it could be a search warrant or some other type of warrant, but they have to go through a court process to get permission to come onto a piece of property. And they come onto the piece of property to investigate the commission of a crime, or to search for an individual. So if there is imminent danger that they have to be very careful about articulating, then they can go on a piece of property. If somebody obviously is being held at gunpoint, obviously they don't wait for a court order to be able to go onto a piece of property. But generally, they don't have a right of entry. Our building official, who you would think has some level of right of entry, he doesn't necessarily have a right of entry on property unless there is a clear violation of building code going on, or if there's work being conducted without a permit that's obvious from street. So building official has very limited right of entry. The one of the only town officers that actually has a higher level of right of entry is your health agent. So Eric can go on properties, but for specific reasons. You can't just waltz around private properties. So I tell you all that because one of the challenges with that our town attorney has found with the draft rat ordinance, we call it, but the rodent control ordinance, is that there is no effective way to enforce that. So approaching trying to control rodents from that angle really doesn't. I mean, it tells citizens that we're addressing. Well, the perception is we'd be addressing the issue, but the reality is that we wouldn't be able to actually enforce what the council passes. So that's how essentially it got to a Board of Health sort of referral. Several counselors suggested that it might be better for this board to take a look at what the ordinance says and then try to rework it in an effort to draft regulations that would go more towards the source of rat infestations or rodent infestations than than to sort of a top down, we're going to come on your property if you've got rats and try to enforce something. So that is the very long story of how it got to the Board of Health agenda. And what I think my suggestion would be, I don't have an answer on how we should do this or what it should look like. And certainly I don't know, we can certainly go around, see if we have, you both have any ideas, or Eric has any ideas, but I think what I'd like to do is sort of frame the issue, which I did a little bit, and give you the opportunity to do some research on your own. Not every, but many Massachusetts cities and towns have either health regulations, or they've got Board of Health generated educational materials on how to prevent the introduction of rodents through just pretty darn simple things. Tight containers that store chicken feed or what have you. So what I think I would suggest is the board do a little bit of research on your own and just see what different options are out there. I have done some research myself, and I will absolutely share that with you. I'll give that to Eric. I know Eric has done some research as well, just to figure out what we could do as a town, as a Board of Health versus town council ordinance, and then come back, regroup, go through the research that we've all done, and just try to determine what makes sense for Bridgewater, because that's ultimately why we're here. So that's my way overly long spiel, but that's kind of, I don't know that you certainly can dig into some substance tonight. I don't know if we're ready to do that. Certainly I don't want to discourage that, but I just in order to use your time most efficiently, that's kind of what I was thinking, is just get you some information that we have, let you do some research on your own. Certainly Eric can give some guidance between now and the next meeting, and then maybe come back and give some ideas about what potentially draft regulations might look like in Bridgewater. So that's just sort of my thought. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions. So did this come from a single complaint, or was this a series of complaints in certain neighborhoods?
The ordinance, the proposed ordinance that got introduced at the council level, which is now sitting in committee, essentially came from one series of complaints. One neighbor that was purportedly drawing the rats into the neighborhood. So
okay, has anything been resolved thus far with this this complaint? Has the town been able to enforce any, or?
No, the town. I know Eric has had discussions with the property owner that the complaint is filed against. The police department has had interaction with that owner as well, and obviously, there are at least a handful of town councilors that have heard from from the complainant. But really there is nothing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, but there's nothing specific that the town can really do. There's nothing for the town to enforce right now. So we're sort of at a standstill.
Yeah, there's nothing to enforce. I've spoken to the residents of that particular single family home a couple of times. They do have, chickens, geese, things of that nature, which I did recommend. Make sure you clean up, keep the food sealed in containers, and try to do the best you can from creating any kind of nuisance for the neighbors, because we've had a couple of neighbors witnessing the issue. But other than that, I mean, we have had other issues this past year. We had a 2-family out on Mount Prospect that I had to speak with the landlord on. Basically, it was college rental. The trash was everywhere. It was constant for me on a weekly basis. The landlord finally addressed the issue, and it seemed that the rat infestation, they migrated to the center of town. And I found one of the rentals over there was infested with a colony. The landlord was appreciative of the findings. She was cooperative. She called in Burgess consistently over a period of 5 months and got rid of the entire colony. So then what we seen was a couple of rats here and there on a couple of rentals around the academy building, which the landlords have put up traps. You'll see the little stone rat traps around. We found a couple of dead rats. With the college kids moving back in now, we're seeing overloaded dumpsters. So I've been going around being vigilant on the overloaded dumpsters, with the dumpster companies, in contact with them about being cautious about picking up the trash from the ground and not just leaving it there when their dumpster truck comes and picks it up and just leaves the trash on the ground. So they've been, in particular, Wind Waste has been very cooperative on that end. So a lot of the problem I see going around is the dumpster companies are going out of business, selling to another company, and those companies aren't as picking up as frequent. So I'm getting a lot of overloaded dumpsters, and I'm having to go around and have the landlords pick them up, have the dumpster come get emptied a lot sooner than possible. That's been the issue between the college kids moving in and the college kid moving out. And that's what's creating your rat infestations at those sites. And most of the landlords have been cooperative, but there is nothing legally that I can do to back up any enforcement of any issues. Say if a landlord is not cooperative and they just tell me to get off their property and they continue to create a problem, yes, it's hard to prove that they're creating it, but if you have neighbors that have pictures and documentation, in the same manner, if their trash is affecting their property on the abutter's property, and I can prove that through pictures and documentation, that helps enforcement. That helps me to be able to say, you are the root of the problem, here's the evidence, and I can enforce it in that manner. But if I don't have evidence, it's kind of hard to enforce something. But at least if you have it in writing, that'll help.
Okay, so I'm looking at the draft ordinance. So the only thing is, I don't actually see anything in the draft ordinance per se about fowl feed or chicken feed. It seems like it mostly pertains to like trash and storing the trash. And
Exactly.
so the thing, my pause there is, then you go into like inspector's authority, and that's where we're having issues. But I don't know if we want to give the town's police like a free rein to, all these trash companies are pulling out, and you're going to these different trash companies, and they're giving you these little tiny barrels. So I think some people are having issues within like a week closing some of those lids.
Yeah,
So
I think, I'm sorry, Bill.
So inspector's authority, any police officer of the town or health agent may to enforce the provisions of the article. So it makes it sound like our proposal here, which I guess this is where we're running into troubles. I just don't know if the community at large is going to feel about that language. So
I think
that
you've got two issues there. I think you're right. Having the perception that we're transitioning into a police state of some sort is an issue. But I think Eric Moore was the one that drafted who's council president, drafted that proposed ordinance, and I think he borrowed heavily from something from another state. And so as I mentioned, that's one of the problems is the police department doesn't have a right of entry So they can't go, and even Eric, I don't think, can go and, start rifling around somebody's backyard to make sure that the, trash containers are tight.
So what recourse does the town or the police department have in the event of several complaints? From a group of
Therein
neighbors?
therein lies the problem. The recourse, there's very little recourse right now. I think Eric tries to enforce just based on the power of the perceived power of local government. But as he points out, if there were regulations in writing, and there should be, clearly should be many regulations on many different health issues. But if there are regulations in writing that he can point to and say, here's the town regulation that allows me to enforce this, that gives him the authority, the actual authority, instead of this perceived authority, to actually solve the problem, or to work with homeowners to solve the problem. So therein lies the biggest challenge when it comes to the lack of regulations. It's just, you don't have the actual authority to go on to property and solve problems.
So if there were language in an ordinance or a town order, is there any way moving forward that the police and town authorities could have some level of enforcement? Could they get warrants based on that? I
don't think keeping keeping a messy house rises to the level of a criminal offense, and if it does, I'm in trouble. But I do think that while it wouldn't rise to a warrant, a criminal offense, it gives Eric, and really not the police department is not in the business of checking chicken feeders and making sure that they're adequately protected against rodents. That really is not their function. So, but it gives Eric the ability to address infractions or address problems like this. And I think that's really ultimately what we're looking for, is instead of voting a town law, which is an ordinance, the Board of Health can really address the underlying issues, and that is not trying to not trying to eliminate rats or kill rats or whatever. The whole point about health regulations is to provide some preventative regulations so that this doesn't, it never gets to the point where you're drawing rats. So if just, for example, if you had a Board of Health regulation that said, animal feed has to be kept secure, when not being used, that helps prevent the problem. Your garbage containers, have to have secure lids and cannot allow rodents or there can't be a way for rodents to get into your garbage cans. You can't overfill garbage cans such that you'll have an attractive nuisance for rodents. Those are the kinds of things that I think are much more easily enforced, than by Eric or the various inspectors rather than the police. Does that make, I don't know if I'm making a whole lot of sense, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
So we're looking for a guidance to the community from the Board of Health that's not enforceable.
No. Well, right now the ordinance, that ordinance doesn't really work. I mean, it looks good, it sounds good, but it doesn't really work in terms of enforcement. And I think several counselors have reached out to me and been concerned that we might be in a position where we're passing an ordinance, we're passing a law that is not enforceable. And that's almost worse than doing nothing, because if you pass this ordinance and you've got this expectation that local government's going to do something about this problem, then and then you can't do something about the problem, then it creates a frustration, in town, and that's understandable. So again, shifting the concept from the from an ordinance or a town law, and giving the Board of Health the opportunity to promulgate some regulations about the source of the issues, I think is what many of the counselors thought would be a much better idea.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
I pretty much had the same questions as William, so they already answered.
Yeah, I think ultimately it just gives us something to refer to. Like I said, most of the time people are cooperative and they're willing to work with. I have complaints, and I'm not here to encroach on your rights or anything like that, or trespass. I'm just here to let you know we've received complaints, we're seeing it in the neighborhood. Have you seen anything? Is there anything that you think might be out of sorts that's causing the issue? And not to blame people individually, because that's hard to prove. So I shy away from blaming individuals when, even if the neighbors are still complaining, I say there's an issue going around in the neighborhood. I just want to know if you see it going on in your property. If so, I just like to make you aware of it. If there's anything that you think might be contributing to this issue, please let me know in the office, and I'll point you in the right direction on how to take care of that and alleviate the issue. But there are, it's very rare, but so often you might get the person, it's the same thing when I go out on food inspections, or a restaurant owner doesn't secure their dumpsters or close the lids or clean up the mess around their dumpsters or close the doors, things like that I have to write them up on it. I haven't found anybody in town for that, but it's the same manner. It's like you can write somebody up and you have a financial course of action here with a small fine if you can prove that within the limits of the law, with evidence-based. So I never go past, I will never blame somebody unless I have enough direct evidence to find somebody. But it's always the first and foremost step that I always take is to talk to the people. Don't say you're guilty of this. You have to interact with the citizens first, get their perspective, and then give them guidance. That's my job, is to educate them, give them guidance first. I don't ever want to have to fine anybody or enforce any policy. But if it's on the books, we have that as backup in case we do ever have to go to court and seek legal issue. But at least if we have it in writing, that's some way to start.
Yeah. And that's, I'd emphasize what Eric said about, education. I think I know Eric's work. I know all of the inspectors are, really there to help people. We're there to help people. We're not there. We don't create arbitrary rules just so that we can enforce them. We're there to solve problems. And if solving a problem means educating folks on, how best to keep their animal feed, maybe they've never kept animals, but if they're educated on how to keep animal feed, on how to keep the pens clean within reason, water sources and so forth, that goes a long way, most of the time, 99% of the time. But there's always that 1%, and that's, we spend most of our time internally dealing with sort of that 1/10 of 1% that just we have to come down a little heavier on. So
Is there a way we can just issue some communication to residents about the problem and just tell people, hey, just be cognizant of the problem, be careful before going the next step? Because that, like indeed, if 99% of the people understand the problem and just fix their own issues locally, it might resolve it on its own. Like mosquitoes don't leave water outside. Everybody knows it.
I think that's a good point. And the short answer is yes. I think if you start doing some research into what other cities and towns do, especially cities, they've got all kinds of information on how to do things that will prevent or dissuade rodent populations from moving in. So absolutely, and that's that is absolutely something within the board's purview. If an educational campaign, absolutely within the board's purview. And I think anytime you are looking at any kind of, regulations that by definition regulate people's property or regulate their practices, far better to sort of preface that with education than to just arbitrarily come down hard on a regulation, or at least be perceived as coming down hard on a regulation without that education. In fact, I think if you look back 6 or 7 years, whenever that was, when the prior Board of Health tried to just implement fowl, domesticated fowl regulations, I think that was exactly the problem. There was no, there was no education up front. There was no, people didn't understand what the problem was that the board was trying to regulate. And so the regulation, or the proposed regulation, was probably way premature, and an educational component, an educational campaign would have been much more effective and probably likely would have solved the problem. So that's a good point.
What means do we have to communicate, like a little one-page pamphlet?
So if the board were to develop a one-page pamphlet or whatever the case may be, we have folks that can design a web page based on that. We can position that kind of things prominently on the website. We can certainly mail, the old-fashioned mail to folks that we know raise animals. So there are a number of ways we can get that kind of message out.
Well, it would not necessarily be to only people who raise animals. Probably all residents, everybody has trash, everybody has things that are susceptible. And then they can talk to their neighbors also if they know about the problem. Hey, I saw you trash out there. I heard we have rats.
We could do that. Within reason, we can do stuffers in tax bills. Then in that way, that your message is getting out to everybody. But yeah, there are definitely
water
ways
bills.
to do it. Or water bills. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you got the BTV, you can do Facebook, the Bridgewater Facebook page. Even a short
don't watch it, so-
presentation on the Board of Health Board of Health Department's website, something like to that manner. Even maybe some local feedback from local farmers on how they keep their farm animals and clean and their feed in check and everything like that.
Yeah, you gotta make it simple. There's only some people on Facebook. I don't look at it. I don't watch the BTV either, and there's probably a fraction of the people watching BTV.
You hit the nail on the head. I mean, anytime the town tries to get a message out, it's increasingly difficult. It used to be that when we had newspapers, the newspaper would be covering this meeting, and they would, write an article, and everybody in town, got the local paper. And that's all gone away, and it's not, sadly never going to come back. So the, Facebook is sort of make your own news kind of platform, which isn't great. But we do try to push things out via Facebook. But I think that the one way you always capture people, well, you capture the most people, is usually through a stuffer in your tax bill or your water bill.
Yeah, everybody opens that.
Yeah. No, nobody wants to open that, but everybody does open that.
Even if it takes you a month to open it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that So anyway, I thought this would be a good opportunity. I certainly don't want to keep you very long, but I thought this would be a good opportunity just to sort of vet the issue, and then let you do a little research on your own, and Eric and I can get together and we can compile, a lot of the information, a lot of the research that we've done, and push it out to you as well. So if that sounds good, and then we can regroup, we can reconvene, perhaps in a couple of weeks or so, and go through some of the better ideas that you find and that we've forwarded. So
at this point, should we set up an email thread between all of us where we can share ideas between now and a meeting that we schedule?
So I think what you don't want to set up a thread.
Okay.
But I think you want to go through Eric to make sure that nobody, in this case, the two of you.
I would mean like a thread that he was on. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think.
Okay.
I think pushing information from Eric out, so from staff to the board members, is sort of a one direction thing.
Okay.
You can always go back. Either of you can always go back and forth with Eric or with me. But you just can't go back and forth with each other on board issues. So, and I apologize. It's awkward, but that's the nature of the open meeting law. So we definitely don't want you to ever be friends. That's kind of the objective of the open meeting law, I think. But if we do something in a couple of weeks, or several weeks after you've had time to take a look, I think does that give you enough time?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get something out fairly shortly within the next few days. I think I'll touch base with Eric and we'll get our information out. It's probably disjointed, but it's at least gives you some ideas of what other towns in the state are doing. There's no reason you can't look nationwide, but Massachusetts, does have its own set of laws that govern a number of things. So, if your focus is mostly on Massachusetts, that's probably would make more sense. But certainly, if you find somebody, in Iowa has some interesting regulations or educational materials, let's talk about it. So.
Boston probably has something because they do have that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was one of the ones I think I looked at. Absolutely. Take a look.
Yeah, I think I've been talking to the several health agents in the community surrounding us, and nobody has any such regulations, so they're just waiting to see what we do. Piggyback on us in the future.
Yep, nobody. I mean, Eric's right. I mean, I was shocked when I started to do some research on the part of the council. There are no communities in Massachusetts that have ordinances or bylaws specific to rodent control, which I found very interesting. And so I went to the town attorney and I asked him, I gave him obviously the draft that Eric Moore had drafted. And I said, how come nobody else has, no other city or town has a rat ordinance or a rodent control ordinance? And he said he was going to look at it, but that's got to be a telltale sign that there's probably some constitutional issues with the proposed ordinance that Eric had come up with. So I know technically we don't have a public what is it called, Josh? The
public comment.
A public comment, but I know Mrs. Hanson, I see her hand is up. So Mrs. Hanson, if you wanted to chime in as a farm related person.
Oh, thank you, Janet Hanson, Pleasant Street. I'm not necessarily talking about farm thing, and I haven't had a chance to see what Mr. Moore was proposing. So and I'm listening to everything, which sounds, you know, pretty good. You guys are going to be looking into things, but I just wanted to mention, it wasn't brought up, so I'm not pointing out anything, but I just want to implore that the town does not promote any type of rat poison usage.
Yeah.
Rat poison is highly known to not discriminate what animals are affected, and so many animals that prey on rodents are poisoned and unable to clot their blood. They eventually die a slow death. You have foxes that when you see them with mange, they may very well be affected by rodenticide because their immune system body is weakened. They're more likely to, and they virtually don't, they bleed to death. And we've had eagles, owls feeding their young, raccoons. I mean, people don't realize that rats don't die instantly when they get rat poison. They too die a slow death, but makes them weaker so that prey can catch them. So a whole litter can be affected. So I feel strongly that we don't promote the usage of rat poison as an option. As I said, I didn't see what Mr. Moore was proposing, but I just want to put it out there that should not be part of the equation. And it is not just related to people who have animals in the city, as you had mentioned in Boston. They're not people with animals, they're people with trash. So, and it is a matter of how people handle their trash. We did have a huge problem during COVID that all of a sudden everybody had rats. And they eventually kind of died down a little bit because people started to, I mean, restaurants weren't serving anymore, so the rats went somewhere. But I just wanted to point that out, and I look forward to seeing what Mr. Moore had proposed. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's,
Good seeing you, hearing you, Janet. See you later.
So for reference, he did mention in the his proposed ordinance, use of rat traps and baits, and then he left in, if necessary, he did leave in parentheses, need to discuss reference to prohibit use of harmful pesticides. And I
Right.
know Gilliam was adamant about that when he first read the ordinance as well.
Yeah.
And my stance on it is the town shouldn't promote its use through an ordinance or a health. So I think we're all on the same page there.
Yeah, most pest control companies do have the alternative. Burgess did a lot of trapping at one of our buildings in the center of town rather than use the rodenticide. They did do the trappings and they did relocate them. I don't know what they did with them, but they got rid of them.
That's good. All right, so I unless anybody has anything else, I would suggest, I don't know if you want to try to identify a date and time for our next meeting, or just hold off until we see what kind of information we can come up with. I think it's up to both of you. I'm certainly fine either way.
I'm fine with scheduling a meeting now or over the next couple days. I think if we're going to schedule a meeting, we should do it in the next like 48 hours or so, just to make sure it gets done.
Do you have, if you have your calendars, we can just do it now then. No point in trying to reinvent the wheel twice.
Gilliam, what was your availability? I know it changed a little bit from.
Basically, it's the same. So Wednesday is good, except between 4 o'clock and 6:15.
I'm available any evening. I'm also available I have a very inconsistent schedule, but I'm available in the evenings. I have a lot of
Yeah.
days off, but never the same days.
Yeah, just not before 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Do you want to look ahead? Maybe Wednesdays were good. Is that what I heard, Guillaume?
Yeah, except between 4:15 and 6:15.
Okay.
6:30 is good.
6:30. Let me just look.
On
I'm look- Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say on October 4th and October 11th, I'm also available all day long.
Would you rather do, if we did October 11th, would you rather do something during the day? Or in the evening?
It's up to you, Gillian.
It'll be okay either way.
Because I won't be here on the 4th, not that you need me, in fact, probably be better off without me. But I could do any time between 1 PM and 3 PM on Wednesday, the 11th.
That works for me.
Want to try 1 PM on the Wednesday, the 11th, October 11th?
Sure.
All right, Eric, is that okay with you, Eric? Oh, you're on mute. We'll do Board of Health Wednesday, October 11th, and we'll shoot for 1 o'clock. And I'll get Josh can send out a Zoom link or Teams, whatever it is.
Yep, I'll get a agenda posted, Zoom link posted, and get the link out to everybody for the calendar invite.
Perfect. Okay.
Is
All
there
right.
is there anything Gilliam or Eric other than this that you want to put on an agenda for the next meeting?
No, that's good.
All right. Good. And any other thoughts? I'm excited to get back to the back to the drawing board, because I know you've been thank you for being patient over the course of the last however many years. But I do think, as I mentioned earlier, I think the town council is now in a position where I think it wants to work pretty closely with the Board of Health and make sure that what the Board of Health is doing sort of conforms to what the council is thinking. So I think that's a great place to be. And so your expertise is going to be much needed in the months and years ahead. So this is all good.
It's a good sign too if we don't hear anything.
That's true too. So when we in our office, if we don't get any complaints, it's that we're doing really well or we're just failing miserably, and there's probably no in between. So we try to look on the bright side. All right. I guess that's good. So we'll adjourn this one and regroup on October 11th.
Great.
All right. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Good. Thank you. Good night.
Hey guys,
Good
have a
night.
great night. See you
Good
tomorrow,
night.
Michael. See you tomorrow, Josh.
See ya.